I'm Nicole Cliffe, parenting advice columnist at Slate. My column runs Monday and Friday. I'm very excited to welcome you to Care and Feeding Live, my new weekly show, and I'll be here on Facebook every Tuesday morning answering your parenting and childcare questions and your pet questions. I don't know if that's where you're at these days. I really don't mind. Um, so, as you'll remember, last time I introduced you to some of my cursed estate jewelry. Today I'm wearing merely this extremely cursed football cap, which is a source of sorrow for me. Go Niners, and also rest in peace, sports. We all miss sports a lot. I hope you're watching The Last Dance. It is amazing. I have so many opinions on the Detroit Pistons in the late 1980s I did not have before. And justice for Scottie Pippen, man. I also think that Jerry Reinsdorf is getting off way too light in this documentary because he was Jerry Krause's boss. He could have said, listen, you've got to pay Scottie more. MJ could have said, you have to pay Scottie more. But that's the past. We are now in the future. And we are just living our lives. These earrings are not cursed. They cost $60. They are from Missoni, and I got them on The Real Real. So you are extremely fortunate that I am here talking to you today, because when I agreed to do this live chat, I said to my bosses, if I do the live chat tomorrow, I guarantee my friend's horse is going to have her first foal, which of course she did. Guys, can we get a picture of the foal? It should only, yes, look at him. He's a little colt. His mom, who you can see up there, is an appendix quarter, which means half quarter horse, half thoroughbred. And her baby daddy is a Frisian who was used in a Post Malone music video. So we've been calling the little dude Foal Malone, but there'll be a real name eventually. But if I were not here talking to you, I would be in my car going to Stockton to wave at my friend from 10 feet away very safely. But he's very sweet. Thank you so much for showing him to us. He can now disappear. Wow, that was a real sense of power I just got there. Okay, so the way today is going to work and going forward is I've pulled, not I, my boss, Brian, has pulled 5 questions for me to answer, which I have not seen yet, and I'm excited to. And what I would love you to do is to chime in with any additional questions you have or follow-up comments on what I've said in my answers. And then I will get to those when I'm done answering the 5 questions. And that's how things are going to go today. So I'm going to go ahead and read the first question. My child is 4.5 months old and has been living under quarantine since before she hit 3 months. I'm worried about the long-term effects of these conditions on her development. I know there's been no research on the subject because the situation is unprecedented in modern times, but I'm wondering if you can offer me any reassurance. First, the bright side, my daughter is a total delight. She has no idea what's going on, of course. And my husband and I purposefully try to cultivate a happy and relaxed atmosphere at home. I feel really lucky to get all the extra time with her since I never had to go back to the office after maternity leave. Working from home while taking care of her is difficult, but I'm making do. She's hitting her developmental milestones, and I love watching her learn and grow every day. And of course, we're so lucky to be healthy. Now, the things that worry me. What happens to a child with such limited social exposure? The only people she ever has contact with are her parents. She plays with the same toys every day, all within the confined space of our apartment. We do take a walk around our neighborhood each afternoon, but that's the extent of her seeing the outside world. I long to take her to a museum or library. I'm deeply sad that her grandparents, aunts, and uncles are unable to see her in person during this special time, so we FaceTime with family members every day. Am I overexposing her to screens by doing this? And about working from home, will it damage her psychologically to see her parents staring at computers so much? Any insights or advice you can offer would be so helpful. On top of the anxiety and uncertainty about the virus, I'm concerned this will harm my daughter in the long run. Oh, honey, it's going to be fine. She's 4.5 months old. This is totally okay. There are various cultures that do not actually have a word for baby until they're about a year old, because the mom-baby unit is the thing they have the word for. Your baby really only needs you at 4.5 months old. It's just absolutely the truth. When children are 3 is a really good age for them to start being in spaces like with other kids for longer periods of the day. That's when they can start to do parallel play, really get into that sort of thing. Right now, being with just you and your partner is fantastic. it's all your baby needs. I think she's probably extremely happy. Um, as you know, FaceTime restrictions are important. The American Association of Pediatrics really doesn't want kids to have any screen access under the age of 2, but FaceTime is not the same because the issue is that we want kids to see and respond and have their facial expressions mimicked back at them. It's the interaction that's important. The fact that it's a screen doesn't matter. So FaceTiming is actually a fantastic, fantastic way for your child to have those really important interactions with other people and for her grandparents to get to see her and just dote on her and her aunts and uncles. And she's pretty blobby right now at 4.5 months. At 9 months, they really start to come alive. But at 4.5 months, they're still, a little amoeba-y. But it's going to be mostly wonderful for other people to get to see her. And she'll check in and out of wondering what FaceTime is. But it really, the most important thing and what separates it from putting on a video for your child is just that what's so important developmentally is for children to say things and for us to get excited and echo those sounds back to them and to see facial expressions change as she makes facial expressions. So really, I don't want you to be concerned at all about FaceTime. It's a wonderful tool. It's fantastic for her. That's going to be great. 4.5 months, this is a blip in her life. There are plenty of people who don't go outside for a long time after they have a baby, and you're getting her out for daily walks, which is fantastic. She's getting fresh air, which is important for everyone. I think you're doing really well. I don't think you have anything to be concerned about. 4.5 months is, frankly, just a fantastic time to be stuck in quarantine for a baby. I'm also happy that, you didn't have to go back to work because there was no work, which is unfortunate. But I think you should treat this as having a really great extended Canadian-esque period of maternity leave and just enjoy this time. Think about the benefits of it that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And just, be gentle with yourself, which I feel is my number one piece of advice for people right now, especially people who are actively asking for help. Because if you're actively asking and concerned about your child, you're usually a pretty good parent because you care. So I think this is a great situation. Right now, just make sure you're reading lots of books to her, I love the black and white books, like little babies respond to those really well. Um, just be down on the floor, meet her where she is, hang out with her, just have fun, try to really enjoy this. You're someone for whom this terrible situation is a little bit of a gift, even if you're going stir crazy and have cabin fever. But for your baby, it's great. Your baby is fine. Your baby is not impacted in any way by coronavirus. And I'm just really happy to be able to completely reassure the person who sent this question to me because I think it's great. There are no problems here. You're doing fantastic. Okay, I'm going to answer the next question. I'm a 32-year-old mom of an 11-year-old daughter. I currently share custody of my daughter with her father, and we do not have a good co-parenting relationship at all. It's gotten so bad in the past. My daughter once had to have visits scheduled at my local precinct. Although I've made many attempts to correct things and be the bigger person, he is very bitter. He is also very disrespectful to me. About 2 years ago, I got diagnosed with lupus and was very sick, and I had to leave my daughter with him for more time than normal due to my hospitalization, which I thought was an okay thing to do. That was a complete disaster. Her father uses these manipulative games. Like if I asked my daughter to clean up or do simple chores, her response would be, "My dad doesn't make me," or the slightest correction or discipline, she becomes very defiant. I feel as though he rewards my daughter to get in her good side. He has said to me that he is the better parent and my daughter likes him better. Things like this make me feel horrible because I feel me being sick and away from her has allowed him to brainwash my daughter. Recently, while coaching my daughter on folding clothes, she got very angry and pushed me. Upon talking to her, I asked why she would hit me, and I'm the parent. Her response was, "My dad said defend myself." I was angry and blown away. This has happened more than once, and I'm at my final straw. I've confronted him in regards to this, and his response is always negative and nonchalant. He does not correct her in these moments at all. I feel as though he thinks he is gaining cool points with her, and also because he simply has an issue with me, which sounds crazy. I feel this may get worse. I feel like her father is toxic and is making things worse by not correcting her. I feel like I have to walk on eggshells around my daughter. I find myself not wanting to be around her, and I feel horrible because she's a daughter and needs a mother's guidance. Her father is really interfering with me in her relationship in a toxic way. Any advice would help. Okay, well, that's the exact opposite of the previous question because this is a terrible situation and I'm really, really sorry about it. Co-parenting can be challenging for everyone. I don't think anybody who's co-parenting a child with an ex has a completely, cookies and cream situation going on. But this is objectively pretty bad. And she's 11 and it's been going on for a long time. Uh, I don't know what your custody split currently is. And I think that if I were you, I would talk to my divorce attorney and just bring up the topic of parental alienation. I don't want you to get dragged back into court to hash that out, but it might be wise for your husband to recognize that courts are taking parental alienation more seriously and that this sort of thing is just so destructive to the long-term relationship between you and your daughter. My other advice is going to be, you're just going to have to very clearly delineate between dad's house and mom's house. By 11, kids are very capable of knowing that there are different rules at dad's house and mom's house. Part of what you're going to have to do is release the idea that you have any control over what happens during his parenting time. And I mean that barring obviously dangerous situations. If he was being abusive, if he was allowing your daughter to do things that are objectively would put her in physical risk. It sounds instead like he really just wants to undermine you at every turn, which is very challenging. And I think that because you are trying, obviously, to win your daughter back a little bit, you're in a situation where you're going to be inclined to give on things, inclined to hear, well, dad lets me do X. And you don't have to do that. You can just hold the line. Your daughter doesn't get to push you because you're telling her how to fold clothes. That's nonsense. That's something that you can absolutely reach out to your ex-spouse about and say, hey, this is not cool. This is not all right. It's not good for our child. And I certainly hope and wish that that's a priority of his, in addition to being a priority of yours. All you can do is be the absolute best parent you can on your own parenting time without allowing yourself to be shoved around, because I can definitely see that that's happening. And 11 is a very important time to start trying to fix this because once adolescence hits, you get the hormonal stew and then everything just goes completely haywire. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm just saying it would be really great if the next year or so you just worked on this as well as possible. Looking down the road, I do want to tell you in as reassuring a way as possible that my friends who had the cool parent and the mom who made me do work or dad who made me do work do grow to appreciate the things that were wrong about how their cool parent handled the situation and the things that were right about the parent who was like, you have to do your homework. You have to clean up after yourself. You can't wear that to school. All of those things. And it's very hard to say one day this will be better. But I do truly believe that if you are a good parent, an engaged parent, a parent who works at all times to just display your values, live your values, don't just talk about them. That's something I say in the column all the time, but it's because it's true. You can jabber at your kid all day long, but they see what you do. And that's what makes an impact on them. So just when you get a moment, when she's away at her dad's, I want you to just write down what your values as a parent and as a person are. Think about them and think about how you can use your time to really, really display those for her. And I think that that will bear fruit in the long run. But I also don't think the current situation is particularly sustainable in terms of the active alienation he's trying to engage in. Now, you can say to your ex, when you say you want her to defend herself, like that's great. We all want our daughters to be able to stand up for themselves, defend themselves, etc. But we need to talk about how that's actually relating to the parenting that I then get to do when she's with me, because that's not what defending herself means. That's a really, really weird thing to be doing. And pushing you is an absolute no-go. I do not want you to be afraid of imposing consequences on your child for her actions. She's not a baby. She's 11. She knows that she shouldn't push you. And that's not something you have to put up with in the least. The cool dad will ultimately reveal himself to be kind of a jerk over time. She will pick up on that. And all you can do is take complete control of your own time with your daughter and use that time to just really, really work on raising the best kid you can. I want you to be super in tune to what her interests are and to try to meet her with those, even if they're not necessarily your interests, and just find ways to be together that are pleasurable for both of you. And I think that'll make a big difference. And also, stop beating yourself up about your lupus hospitalization. That is not why this is happening. That was a medical situation. It was brief. The fact that he chose to use it as an opportunity to establish himself in a certain way as a primary caregiver, that's in the past. There's nothing you can do about that. But this is not happening because you have lupus. This is happening because you're in a pretty toxic co-parenting situation. Obviously, things are very complicated right now in terms of your options, but I think that although he may not be the sort of person who's open to this at all, reopening mediation in an unofficial capacity might not be the absolute worst idea. And I think that if that's at all a possibility to do a little bit of family counseling, that would be great. We have telemedicine options. And I really hope for a better outcome for you. I feel that this is sad and unfortunate. It's not good for your daughter, and I hope it gets better. And yes, don't be afraid to drop the parental alienation phrase. Really don't, because people are taking it more seriously. And also, I really want you to start getting some stuff in writing. So things that your daughter reports that her dad has said, just jot them down. Times when he brings her back late, jot it down. It's always helpful to have notes on hand so that if you develop a situation where you decide that this is very bad and you need to push for more custody, I want you to have a paper trail to draw from. But definitely don't feel like you can't call up your divorce attorney and say, hey, this is happening. I feel like some of these things are not appropriate, that I think some of them do reach the level of being a real issue in raising a healthy, happy, functioning daughter. And I'm just so sorry this is happening. It's just awful. This is, one of the worst things about splitting up when you have kids is just the knowledge that your child is away from you for large periods of time. And if they are with a person who has a very negative attitude towards you, that's going to rub off. But this will not last forever. This does not mean that you are not going to have a great relationship with your daughter as she gets older, wises up, recognizes who was the one who remembered when her recitals were, when it was the, wear pajamas to school day, reminded her she had tests, all of that stuff. Cool parents are great. Parents who do the work are the most important. And I just want you to know that you're that person and you can keep being that person. And this just sucks. Before I go on to the next question, I encourage you to send in responses and live questions, which I can answer when these 5 questions are over. I know it's kind of a weird time of day for this. You may be on your lunch hour or what passes for your lunch hour now. I'm usually like eating corned beef hash out of a can with a spoon by this time of day, or I would be if I wasn't on mountain time. But just drop your questions in the comments. I'll get to them a little later. I would love to hear what you have to say. Also, they won't show me anything mean, so don't even bother. If you don't like the Niners, that's your journey. I respect that. Okay, I'm going to answer a 3rd question. I'm the mother of a delightful 10-month-old girl. She has a sweet and happy disposition and is hitting all of her developmental milestones. As we are hunkering down, I've been spending all day, every day with her while also working from home. I always feel like I need to do scare quotes on working from home right now. My husband is an essential worker and is out of the house Monday through Friday, 9 through 5. She plays contentedly with her toys, crawls around exploring her space. I do get on the floor and play with her from time to time, but I spend a lot of time on the computer or on calls. Sometimes the TV is on, but not cartoons, so she doesn't seem captivated by it. I'm worried she's not getting enough stimulation or that I'm not interacting with her enough. What is the baseline here? Should I be doing flashcards and teaching her words? We do read books every night. I do shapes and colors, but only when I have a few minutes. I teach her to be gentle with the dog. Also, when she's excited or there's music playing, she loves music, she'll flap her arms. Now, of course, I Googled it, and apparently arm flapping is an early sign of autism or a lack of stimulation. Is this a behavior I should seek to curb? And how do I provide enough stimulation in our current lockdown? Oh, man. This is the pretty classic working from home, trying to look after a kid. She's very young, so she's not as young as the 4.5-month-old that we discussed earlier, but she is still very young. I recommend coming up with as loose but possible a routine as you can, so that not too much time passes when you're not really actively engaged with your child. I know you're doing your best, but you're probably going to have to step it up a little bit. I wouldn't worry about the arm flapping. There are about 1,000 things which are soft markers for autism, absolutely, but many kids get excited and flap. It's a joyous behavior. It's a fun behavior. If you're not seeing any other developmental delays, if your pediatrician is not concerned about her progress in general, then I would assume that this is just a joyous reaction to life. And even if she was autistic, it's still a joyous reaction to life. And that's why we encourage kids to go ahead and do these things now, as opposed to the quiet hands philosophy, which really messed up a generation or two of autistic kids. And I'm so glad that people are now moving away from that. We all, I think, do little bits of that ourselves. Like, when you hit your thumb and you go like this and it feels better, like it feels better. It's joyous. It's a physical response. So definitely, keep an eye on her developmental steps in general, but it's not a lack of stimulation. She probably just really likes music, which is great. You should play more music. I think that would be fantastic. If it's something she enjoys, it's great. Go for it. Sing along terribly. This is the age at which your children do think you have the nicest singing voice in the world, and that will pass. So enjoy it while it's here. My husband is completely tone deaf, but there was a very long time where my children legitimately thought that his version of Southern Cross by Crosby, Stills, and Nash was the greatest version of anything ever recorded. And he really enjoyed that time and missed it when it was gone. So just, you're working, sing along to the music. Encourage her to make her little movements about it. Getting down on the floor as much as you can, that's fantastic. Teaching her to be gentle with the dog is also great stimulation. As I was saying to the person with the baby who wrote in first, this would be a really good time if you have older relatives who are and friends who are just dying for human contact. Set them up on Skype, set them up on FaceTime, and just let them take on a little of the burden of just talking and making faces at her and doing all those good things. Books are great. Try to build in some book time during the day. And also, I know your husband is working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, but he can definitely take on some of this too when he is around. I'd love to see him use his weekends to engage in some of that just super important, like face-to-face mimicking of expressions. All of that is so important and so good. Laughing when things are funny, like really exaggerated expressions are great. It helps kids a lot learn how people talk and interact with each other in nonverbal ways, and that's really important stuff and very age appropriate for her. But you're slammed. There's no other way around it. You are just slammed, and it's very hard. It's very challenging to work from home. Both of my doors are locked right now, as they were for our last talk. They want to be with you, they want to be on you, and you also have to earn a living and pay your rent or your mortgage. And it's a limited period of time. It's not super ideal. Um, she's there are people who wear their babies in slings for a really long time. Like, this is objectively the case. But if you've got any sort of contraption she can still fit into at this point to kind of just like hang out and be with you while you do what you do, that's great. That may not be an option. Uh, I recommend narrating your day a bunch, because a lot of people find it very difficult to talk to babies because they're babies. And so I remember when my first was little, just, don't do this now, but we would just go around Walmart at 5 in the morning. I'd be like, that's a spoon, you know, those are novelty teas, and just talk about what you're seeing, talk about what you're doing, um, all of that stuff. Just hearing your voice, hearing different intonations in your voice. This is how kids build vocabulary. It's how they learn about the world. And I really think that even under these very difficult circumstances, I think that you can do a great job, just an absolute great job in a difficult situation. And I believe in you, and you're trying, and that's 90% of it right there. But so my main takeaway is, do try to carve out a specific yet loose routine, so that you are, not going huge periods of time without being right there with your baby. And don't worry about the arm flapping. Do keep an eye on developmental milestones in general. And definitely don't discourage the flapping. If it's fun for her, great. It's fun for most of us. Give it a shot. But this is just, I think your question is going to be something with a lot of resonance for a lot of people right now. It's the most common question I'm getting. Questions from people who are trying to quote unquote work from home while also looking after a child. And I just want you to know that this is not going to be something that permanently negatively impacts your child. It's really not going to, in the big scheme of things. But also, do your best to do as much as you can. You can only do your best, but do your best, right? I think you've got this. Okay, I'm moving on to another question. Throughout all the pandemic and economic related uncertainty in the world right now, my husband and I are nervous about the timing of starting our family. This spring is right around when we planned on starting to try, and we can't help but be concerned. We don't have any particular employment worries. My husband is military, so our primary income is relatively secure, but my own work opportunities are going to be drastically reduced for the duration of the inevitable recession. I'm a self-employed massage therapist, and my clients are not wealthy. On the other hand, I have largely planned on being mostly home with the baby, so that's not a huge deal. I even prefer to do a home birth if my pregnancy allows for it, so hospital stays aren't a glaring concern. But if we end up going through a hospital, that's okay. Got to roll with it. We are currently stationed in California for at least one more year, and I would prefer to have my baby here for a lot of reasons. Finally, we're both in our early to mid 30s, so it feels like it's time to get things going. I guess I'm just looking for some reassurance that starting a family isn't a terrible idea, or that we actually should wait. What are your thoughts on family planning / starting in light of the world right now? Okay, so you're in your early to mid 30s. So obviously, no one has an unlimited amount of time, but it's not an immediate time crunch. Um, I think one of the tricky things, many tricky things about our current situation, is that something we don't have a ton of information on is pregnant women and the virus, and babies and outcomes. And that's just, I wish I could tell you more information about that, but we don't have it, and we're not going to have it for a while. Obviously, babies and children have proven to be extremely resilient to the virus, but there are no guarantees. Um, I think that if you want to start a family while you are still in California, I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to do at all. You're going to have, certain things are going to be different. Sansa, excuse me while I let my dog out. You get to see her though. This is Sansa. Sansa, please don't bark at the door when Mummy's on her work call. Out you go. She's supposed to scratch lightly when she wants to go out, but when she can tell I'm distracted, that's not what she does. Okay. I do want to talk to you for a second about home birth. I know it was not your question, but I do generally discourage people who are having their first child from planning on a home birth. I know hospitals seem really scary right now, but the transfer rate for first time moms is already quite high. And a hospital transfer is not a fantastic experience for anyone. I will often hear from people, well, we're just, 10 minutes from the hospital, but that doesn't take into account the fact that, like, okay, so the ride to the hospital is 10 minutes. So you've got yourself, you get into a situation where you and your healthcare provider, ideally a certified nurse midwife, if you're doing a home birth, please no direct entry midwives. Um, when the decision is made to transfer, that's time. Getting you in full on transitional labor down to the car is 10 to 15 minutes because you're going to be stopping to have contractions. Getting you into the car, getting you to the hospital, getting you from the hospital parking lot into an area where you can be triaged. And then if we're talking about a crash C-section, yes, they can put those together in 15 to 20 minutes. I'm just saying it's never 10 minutes away. And the things you don't know as a first time mom are if you are prone to postpartum hemorrhage, which a lot of women are. I am. Um, that's a very scary situation to suddenly be facing at home. Abruptions are rare, but they occur. There are a lot of, and if you've never given birth before, you don't know what your tolerance for pain is. Labor pain is very different from other kinds of pain. You don't know things like, how your birth canal is put together. Your child may be sunny side up. Your child could be breech. These are things that most good midwives will be able to identify, and a certified nurse midwife in most states will not let you attempt a breech at home, which is correct. You should know how to do it, but it's not ideal. So if you want to have a home birth, I usually think it's a much better option for women who have already had, women or men who have already had at least one or two uncomplicated vaginal deliveries, because you really just don't know. You don't know until it's happening. Um, and the last thing you want in the heat of labor is to suddenly have to get into a car and be in transition and then deal with medical personnel who may or may not know you or your situation and have to be brought up to speed. So if you're going to do this, because it's your own life, and I respect that, I want you to talk to your midwife about her transfer rate. Or his transfer rate. I had a male midwife once. He was fantastic. He was ex-Army. He was a delight. And many people make the mistake of thinking that a low hospital transfer rate is what you want because you're like, oh, this person knows what they're doing. They're really good at home birth. Whereas, in fact, that often means that they are reckless. You want to see a transfer rate that reflects what we generally expect to see in transfer rates. And you can Google around and see like what numbers will make you comfortable. But I want you to be in the hands of someone who will not hesitate if situations degrade or plateau to get you out of there, to get you to the hospital in a reasonable fashion. I want you to get references. I want you to call those references. And again, I know this wasn't the point of your question. I just, the US is not a country which is set up to deal with home birth particularly well. The reasons that other countries do it better is because they have infrastructure for it. It's expected. It's a very streamlined process. And, you may be thinking, I'm a low risk, healthy person, but no one knows if they're a low risk, healthy person until they're holding their baby. You don't know if you're low risk until the baby is out. And I would just hate for you to be in a situation where, we're not talking about worst case scenarios, even just having something very unpleasant happen. So I'm telling you this because other people are watching this as well. And that's just my personal view on home birth. Ideally, there are ways to just think about what you wanted in a home birth, right? Like what parts of that appeal to you, and do your best to recreate that in a hospital environment. I delivered all three of my kids with midwives in a hospital. It was extremely comforting to me to know that if anything went south, they just roll the wall back and you've got a full operating room sterilized and ready to go. Also, you want to be close to a NICU. That's also really important. If your baby has respiratory issues at birth, you don't want to be messing around trying to drive that kid to the hospital. Um, so, you know, you have the right to do it. Um, I personally don't think it's a great option for first time parents. That's just how I feel, but I'm also the advice giver. So I think you should go ahead and have a baby. Start, try to have a baby now if you want to have a baby at this time. You don't know how long it's going to take you to have a baby. If you spend a year trying to conceive, like you're going to be real glad you started now. I can't look into a crystal ball and tell you much about COVID and babies, but I can tell you that you don't know when you're going to be able to conceive. So if you are in your early to mid 30s and you want to have a baby and you'd like to have a baby while you're still in California, go for it. Go for it. There are no guarantees in this world. And as a personal favor to me, just I would like it if you took a minute and maybe thought a little more seriously about a hospital birth and about the ways that you can have the kind of hospital birth that you like. You can still have the tub. You can still have little flameless candles around. You can play your playlists. You can wear your street clothes. I always assumed I would want to wear my own clothes, and then each time I got to the hospital, I just immediately became naked and went fully feral for the next, 6 hours or however long it takes to happen. But your baby can get into a weird position. They can have respiratory issues. You can have issues you don't know about. And in the time of COVID, if your baby was born with COVID, you want that baby born at a hospital. You really, 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 really do. I know that it just sucks not to be able to have your partner with you potentially for the delivery. But that's just how I feel. That is just my own personal opinion when it comes to home birth. And I just urge you to just take what I'm saying, let some of it go if it doesn't make sense to you, hang on to other parts that do. But for the benefit of other people who are watching, just first time moms, hospital's probably your best place to give birth. Okay, next question. And again, I do need some questions to come in. Otherwise, you're going to hear me talking about all manner of things for the last, 15 minutes of the chat, which might not be so bad. I can tell you about the other sports teams I cheer for. But really do feel free to ask questions or disagree with the answers I've given to previous questions. That's also very helpful. All right. I can barely bring myself to type this out. It just seems like such an impossibly first world problem. But I am at a loss with my feelings and just want some guidance. It's now been 6 weeks since we stopped sending our 11-month-old to our babysitter's house. There are 2 other children who go there, whose families also decide to quarantine. At the beginning of this, when it was theoretically 2, maybe 3 weeks, we all committed to keep paying as long as our households were still employed. The sitter implied that without this income, she would have to look for work and therefore wouldn't be able to commit to our spots being available when this is all over. Well, here we are all these weeks later. My partner and I walk this daily tightrope of who has a virtual meeting when and who can handle which feeding. And is anyone taking the baby outside today? And I think she pooped again. Can you check? I have to finish this report. And the end is only barely in sight and might be a mirage anyway. It's not like you can do online classes with babies, but I'm just struck each time I write the check and mail it that we are still getting paid because we are still doing our jobs. And if we were no longer doing our jobs, we would not be getting paid. I really bought into the idea that people who aren't affected financially by this should continue to spend, if you can, to keep everyone's heads above water. We get takeout regularly from places that we want to stay in business, so I'm trying to convince myself this is just like that. But also, I feel like a chump. Am I a chump? Well, I don't think you're a chump. I think that's unreasonable. I think that if possible, it is good to keep paying sitters and house cleaners and other people who, for health reasons, really shouldn't be in your home anymore. But you have to take your own financial situation into consideration, and that's a piece of information I don't have for you. If you're doing super, super well financially and you're just annoyed by the fact you're writing a check to someone who is no longer providing you with goods and or services, then probably keep paying this person. But if you're getting stretched financially, if you have job instability, no, it's okay. It's okay to stop. And it's okay to say, I'm sorry if this means that you're going to have to find other work. Because when this is over, you can find another childcare provider. You have to do what's right for you and your family. These are difficult times. There are other ways that you can support essential workers in your community. But no, you're not a chump for having tried to do the right thing, as long as possible. And if it's only an irritation to you, I encourage you to continue. But if in any way it's creating financial instability, if either of your jobs are jobs which have the possibility of disappearing on you in the near future, you don't have to keep paying this person forever. I would love it if you could. I mean, obviously, everyone would love that, but we have to deal with the reality of life as it is. And it is okay if you have to say, I'm furloughing you. I furloughed a babysitter for 3 months, and paid her and said, go ahead and look for other work. We don't know how long this is going to last. And that worked for us and it worked for her. That may not be your situation. I think that right now we're all trying to do this balancing act of sort of like ethics, being civic minded, but also, as I said in my column on Monday, our duty is to the ship, which is your family. As that was a Deanna Troi reference, from Star Trek: The Next Generation. If you missed it, it's a great episode. I strongly encourage it. It's how Deanna finally made her command rank, by making this very difficult decision. I won't get into it further. But you have to do what's right for your family. And what's right for your family, since you are doing all the childcare, maybe I cannot keep paying this person who is not doing my childcare forever, which sucks. Obviously, she would like to keep getting paid, but you don't have to do that if it's placing a strain on your family's finances. Ideally, you'll be able to hire this person again, but if that's not the case, then you will find a new childcare provider when this is over. And that's just how things are going to be. So you're not doing anything wrong, nor are you a chump. Just take a look at your finances, talk to your partner about it, and just, be ready to say, we'll pay you for another month and that's it. Feel free to look for another job. She should be looking for another job regardless. I mean, she should be sensible about that. And it's a terrible time to find a job. There's not much you can do about that. So I have one more question for you, and then I'll recommend some parenting books, talk to you about sports. We've only got 15 minutes left, so it's really not that bad. Dear Nicole, my mother-in-law, love a question that opens with a mother-in-law, had some deep-seated insecurities, and by her own admission, was not a great parent to her own children, largely because she instead spent her energy catering to my psychologically abusive father-in-law. They are now divorced. Her insecurities range from the professional to the personal, but while she's at least gotten a handle on her life professionally, after years of letting her husband wreck dozens of job opportunities, she put herself through school and has held the same steady, fulfilling job for the last 6 years. She's an intelligent, interesting woman. But since my husband and I have become parents, our daughter is 18 months old, my mother-in-law's insecurities have made it truly unbearable to be around her. She will contradict literally anything I do or say as a parent, tell me I should relax and that I'm overly worried when my baby has been sick and she's been visiting, and invent non-truths, lies, but they're about small things, to tell my husband so that she looks good in front of him. These non-truths don't usually make her look good, but she assumes they are what he wants to hear and will literally make a 180 from one thing she has said to me moments before to its opposite when my husband enters the room, trying to appease him with her response. The whole thing makes me feel like I'm living in a warped reality during her visits. And while my mantra has been to generally ignore her, we only see her a few times a year, and then complain bitterly to my friends and husband, this strategy doesn't bring me a lot of happiness. My husband fully supports and believes me, but it exhausts him hearing complaints about his mother. Now that my very bright, observant, and sensitive daughter is nearing an age where grandma will inevitably lie to or around her, I know I will start losing it with my mother-in-law. But what do? Sit her down for a chat, scream liar when she first says she'd like to eat at home, and then forcefully claims that no, in fact, she'd like to eat out, that she never said she wanted to eat at home, and that it must have been me who wanted to eat at home, because my husband has suggested we go out and she feels compelled to agree with him? I know, it's so weird. The lies themselves are petty, but their accumulation makes for a denial of reality and an undermining of me that leaves me stunned and incredibly hurt. Where my parents shower my husband with love and praise for his parenting, this is what I get in return. how do I protect my daughter from living in the warped construction my mother-in-law will inevitably build around her too, and show her what is actually true without making her grandmother seem like a terrible, unsafe person? For what it's worth, my mother-in-law adores my daughter and desperately wants a close relationship with her. Okay. Um, so right away, what I see as a good sign is the fact that your mother-in-law and you see each other only a few times a year. So you can handle a lot of things a few times a year. Um, don't be afraid to call your mother-in-law on blatant lying. I mean, that's a really good way to discourage people from blatant lying. If she's been allowed to just make up stuff forever about other people, that's only reinforcing the idea this is an acceptable thing to do. And someday your child will see you thinking this is an acceptable thing to do. So I find that fake confusion is often a great option in these cases. Like, oh, that surprises me because I could have sworn you just said blah. Um, I'm impressed with your mother-in-law in many ways. It sounds like, she's managed to make a life for herself and improve herself in a major way. People who are in long-term psychologically abusive relationships can develop a lot of really terrible, terrible coping skills. And I do want you to try to, you know, I can tell that you have empathy for her. It's obvious in your letter, and that you feel bad complaining about it. But hold some empathy for the fact that this woman really managed to get it together in a way that a lot of people don't, and that she does want to be involved in your life, and that she has these residual crappy coping mechanisms, largely designed very clearly to improve her relationship with her son, who I'm sure she's very conscious she dropped the ball with on numerous occasions when she was still married to his very toxic father. Um, I think that what you really need is to be on the same page with your husband here, which is another thing I say a lot. But yeah, he doesn't want to keep hearing complaints. That's No one really wants to hear a ton of complaints about their mother. My mother is an angel, so obviously no one would ever complain about her, but I would be very upset if someone did. Um, but just as opposed to complaints, talk about strategies, talk about the bigger picture stuff, like here are the behaviors that I don't really want to see around our kid. What do you think we should do to try to minimize this? Um, and again, you only see her a few times a year. If she's, lying over FaceTime, you can end conversations. Um, it's you've got a lot of power in this situation, and especially now because Lord knows you're not going to see her for some time. So try to make a list. Like a physical list is often helpful of like behaviors you can live with, behaviors you can't live with, and then strategies for how to deal with the ones you can't live with. The lying is not great. That's not something you want your kid, to see and to be around. And that's something that you can definitely call her on. You can make the decision to. I would not do it in front of your daughter. Um, I would, kind of like grab her in the kitchen and say, "Hey, that was weird. That just didn't happen." Again, you can say, "I'm confused." You can say, "I'm not sure why you said that." You've got a number of options available to you there. But you absolutely don't have to let someone display constant inaccurate information around your child about actions which she can see and observe are not real. You also don't have to throw under the bus when she's gone. You don't have to be like, "Graham's crazy and she makes stuff up." But you can, as your daughter gets older, you can be like, "Grandma uh, had a very difficult time earlier in her life, and like many people who have had difficult experiences have developed some ways of coping with it which are not how we want to live our lives." And that's the sort of thing that like a teenager can totally hear and understand. And so you're just going to have to, you know those are going to be conversations for later. At 18 months, it doesn't matter. Your daughter, like everything is a mystical fantasy to an 18-month-old. So just focus on her treating your daughter well. Don't let her treat you badly. And instead of just like ending visits and then dumping complaints on your husband. Try to be like, what should we do? What is the path forward? How would you have handled this? And just see if you can't accumulate those things into strategies now before your daughter is actually at an age where she's going to be hearing things and getting weird impressions about how the world works from them. But no, for now, you don't have a ton to worry about. It sounds like this is something that, she's come out of some crummy stuff, and people do, and as a result, they have weird behaviors and they act out, and you just have to decide what you can live with and what you can't. So that is my answer to you. Okay, I think we are fresh out of questions, but we still have a couple more minutes, so we can talk about sports, of which there are none. I grew up a Niners fan because my cousins are Niners fans. They live in Toronto. Um, I am a Maple Leafs fan, of course, because Canada. I'm not a Canadiens fan. The Montreal Canadiens, obviously, I love Canadians in general. I was a Montreal Expos fan, possibly the most fervent who has ever lived, and I was 11 the year of the strike, and I have never gotten over it. So I have never really been able to trust another baseball team again, nor have I quite forgiven Quebec for not adequately supporting the team. We always watched Expos games on the French channel, which was Channel 8, because my father hates Americans. I'm sorry, Americans, but my father hates you. And that's just him. That's his journey. And he didn't want to listen to American commentary on the games, but he did want to hear the noises of the ball hitting the bat, catches, and things like that. So despite the fact he does not speak French, we would watch it on the French channel. I have been watching The Last Dance, which is fantastic. As I mentioned at the beginning, I really encourage you to dig into that. I have watched maybe all of the 30 for 30s documentaries over the last few months. Cannot recommend those enough. They're just fantastic. The Bo Jackson one is especially fantastic. If you have not watched the multi-part O.J. Simpson Made in America, it is maybe the best thing I've seen on TV ever. And I have watched it. And keep in mind, it is several hours long. I have watched it at least 9 times. And so if you haven't watched that yet and you have some time on your hands, put that bad boy up. I didn't know a thing about football, really, honestly, when I started watching it. And even I was like, oh, that guy's a great running back. Like, I can tell he's better than the other people. We got a question. A question came in. Okay, forget sports. Sports not important anymore. Okay. My 14-year-old daughter identified as at least bisexual at 12. I myself was at least bisexual at 12. My wish for her is that she fully embrace who she is and live that truth. My religious view is relaxed and open-minded, while she is drawn to a highly restrictive perspective that considers this a sin. Her father grew up with these views but was not practicing. He and I have very different views on many things. Moreover, she's an intensely regimented person who gets up at 5, runs, exercises, likely military bound. This intense, restrictive lifestyle worries me at times as a mother that wishes for self-acceptance. Unfortunately, she often rejects most suggestions from mom and embraces those from dad, who is not all around all the time growing up. So this makes introducing alternative ideas very difficult. I know this is complicated, but you're psychologically minded as well. Do you have any suggestions on how to support her journey? Okay. Oh gosh. I'm so sorry that she has that she's drawn to thinking of this as a sin. That's just, that's a deeply, deeply upsetting place to be when you're a young queer person. And I think that what she really needs to hear from you is that you don't think that's true, that you don't believe that, that you are warm and embracing of whatever sexual identity she winds up having. I wouldn't worry as much about the intensely regimented, very athletic thing. That's probably just her, I mean, it could be coming from her dad, but it also could be something she really enjoys. I don't think that necessarily has to conflict with self-acceptance, which is a multi-decade process for basically everyone to arrive at. talk to her a lot about what she enjoys about being very athletic, very intense, very goal driven. You may learn some things about what draws your daughter to that. Um, so the two main things I want you to focus on are, supporting and reinforcing her in whatever her sexual identity winds up being, talking about how you don't think it's a sin. There are some great books for this. God and the Great Gay Christian by, I believe, Matthew Vines is fantastic. There are, and here I'm here assuming, of course, that Christianity is the background she's coming from, which may not be the case at all. But there are a lot of really fantastic books by queer people of every faith. And I think that she's definitely old enough to kind of delve into those and just, let them putter around in her mind a little bit and talk to her father about it, because it doesn't sound like he's being particularly homophobic about this, but that's more also his background on it. So keep that line of communication really, really open, just so you can be trying to come at it from the same perspective. And yes, don't get too hung up on the fact that she's very, intense and physical and regimented. That might just be her. There are people who are like that their whole lives. As long as it seems to make her happy. If it seems to be something she's frantically doing to keep herself psychologically above water, that's a different situation. That's a situation where I would recommend therapy, at least introducing the idea and seeing how it floats. But otherwise, try to do some of these things with her. Try to figure out why she enjoys it, what it provides her. You can be extremely, extremely physical and regimented and accept yourself fully. These things do not have to be in conflict with each other at all. And I certainly hope in her case they're not. But that's something you're going to have to figure out just by talking to your daughter and also talking to her dad and just doing the best you can to be on the same page where you can be, even though you're very different people, because most people are. Okay, it is now time to wrap up. It has been so lovely doing this. I'm really looking forward to doing this every week because it mimics human interaction in a way I really appreciate. Please continue to send your questions to Care and Feeding, and we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear a lot of you express like a concern about, oh, first world problem, like, oh, I know there's a pandemic, but X, no, I want to hear those questions. Like, obviously we are all trying to cope with coronavirus and the changes in our lives, but people still want to know, like, when can I start giving my kid rice cereal? And let's hear those too. So don't feel like you ever have to apologize to me for your questions. I want to hear all of them, especially if they're very funny. Yes, that's where I'm at. So it has been so lovely to see you. I am now immediately going to take off my TV makeup, change my clothes, and drive an hour and 10 minutes to stand 10 minutes away, to stand 10 feet away from my friend and her new foal and wave. But I am so glad that we got the chance to talk today, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye, guys.